we're going to get started now with this session. And the name of the session it's a very powerful name. It's Economic Development in the Age of Cooperation. So, if I could ask people to please sit down if possible, or to, if people are having conversations, to kindly wrap them up, if you don't mind. All right, so we're going to get started with this session. So first of all, I'd like to thank Frank Richter for putting this amazing event together. How you did it, I have no idea. You brought some amazing people from all over the world, some of the most influential people with this focus on developing and improving humanity. You brought them all together here, so thank you very much for that. It's very valuable, and it'll be very impactful, for humanity. It's been very powerful for us. And I think a good way to start this off is to talk a little bit about how we met and how we came together. So we manage a late-stage venture capital fund that is focused on the future of humanity. And we're focused on taking bigger bets that have an impact on humanity. In association with that, we produced the first season of a television show, and that television show, quite coincidentally, has the name Success Investing in Humanity's Future, right? So the goal of the show is to take companies that are changing humanity and, importantly, are focused on problems that affect millions of people around the world, right? So each company that is on the show is working on challenges that affect at least 5 million people, right? So that is a big focus of the show. We finished shooting the first season. We expect it to air early next year. And for a show that has such a serious sort of weight to it, we thought, well, we want people to watch this show, so we better put a production team together that understands that has produced some of the longest running shows in television, and has won kind of many awards, right? So we put together an Emmy winning production team that has put together shows like The Amazing Race, Survivor, shows that have been on television for 20 years, and the team's won many awards. Our head writer wrote The Men Who Built America, which was nominated for many Emmy Awards. And then we put together a cast that includes Kevin Harrington, who was on Shark Tank, and then Dylan Ratigan, who created the show Fast Money on CNBC. It was the #1 rated show on CNBC. So we put a large production team together, around 70 people, if I'm not mistaken, and it took them about a year and a half, 2 years to really get the show right. We expect this show to win awards around the world. It's a very powerful show that shows journeys, of some of the most intrepid and daring entrepreneurs that have taken big bets and really staked their reputations and staked their lives, and these are really high stakes, on helping humanity. So we're excited. We're excited for you to see the show. On the stage, we have people that were actually on the show, and the show format is we run a documentary on each company that shows you quite conclusively how they're, the parts of the world that are affected, the number of people that are affected, and really the stakes for all of us. Then we bring the CEO, in some cases the management team, into Rutherford studio in Los Angeles, and we have a deal team. I mentioned Kevin from Shark Tank, Dylan from CNBC. We have a guy, Mohan Ananda. He sold Stamps.com for $6 billion in cash. He's one of the deal makers. Prince Michel from Monaco. He's one of the deal makers. And the real focus is are you really impacting humanity? To be on the show, you have to be venture backed, by the way. That way, we have a sense that there's a level of diligence in the companies, and there's a level of operational infrastructure, board infrastructure, all that kind of thing. So that way, we know that if you say that you're solving a problem that affects 5 million people, we want to know that you have the right infrastructure set up to do that, right? So we bring them into studio, ask questions, we bring experts in. We have everyone from the medical side, the chief medical officer of the American Cancer Society. Some of these gentlemen are experts on the show as well, and I'll introduce them. So we're really proud of what the show has done. Again, it's not the team, the production team is just a classic Hollywood team, first class. There are around 100 Emmy Awards in the team, so that shows you how solid the team is, and they understand how to kind of how to tell important stories. Right? Now, getting to I'll talk a little bit about some of the companies that are on the show, and then I'll talk a little bit about how a show like this can spur economic development in different countries. So we're looking to partner with people in different countries to bring this to countries around the world. Hopefully we do some things with Horasis as well, given just our alignment in focus. So before I'll talk about one or two companies. That's it. And then. But before I do that, there's one really interesting thing that I love. I love if you take something away from this. This is something interesting to take away. There's a company that we have on the show now. I think all of us here would probably think of something called a virus, as a negative thing. Right, that's how we all think it's a virus. Kill it, and the viruses have taken so many lives away. Right, so that's how we would think about viruses. What if I were to tell you that viruses are being used as a means of delivering life-saving medications in some of the most important treatments of our time? What if I told you that we can look at the world in the future and have a generation that says, viruses, are you kidding me? A virus saved my life. What if you could do that? That is the direction, a direction that the world might be going in. And actually, one of the companies that's on our show is going in that direction. I'll tell you one last story, and then I'll talk a little bit about how this ties in with economic development, and then I'll introduce you to this amazing panel here. So just one last story. So our show is about high stakes, authentic challenges of humanity, right? So it's not your classic sort of Hollywood, The Real Housewives, or one of these Bravo shows that you kind of wonder. I mean, a lot of people watch them, but sometimes you wonder what you're watching, right? So just as a story, we have one of the companies in our first season, and there are 18 of them, but one of them is working on solving a particular type of cancer that impacts 10 million people every year. 10 million. Right? One of the core co-founders of this company was a professor at Stanford. Amazing guy. He helped the company raise its first 50 million, in funding. He had a beautiful wife, a son, focused on this challenge. He unfortunately passed away of cancer. The next year, his son passed away of cancer, and the following year, his wife passed away. The entire family was wiped out by cancer. The remaining founders had their origin story rewritten for them. Their focus became, and it's a wonderfully ruthless focus on addressing this particular kind of cancer that affects 10 million people. They are very close to the solution. Andreessen Horowitz, A16Z, is an investor. Khosla Ventures is an investor. To give away a secret, we invested on the show. And since being on the show, former Vice President of the United States, Al Gore, has invested as well. These guys are really close, right? So these are the types of stories that we tell, real human stories, and stories, companies that will impact humanity, consistent with why we're here at Horasis. Now, so when you look at, so you say, okay, well, what do we want to do here at Horasis? We think this show can be a real engine for economic development around the world, right? So we're here in Brazil. The venture economies are great catalysts of economic development. Venture economies. So if you look at Silicon Valley, we spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley. At some point, there was nothing there. There was almost nothing there. Now it is a driver of economic development, not just for Silicon Valley, but for the United States, right? How can this show help do the same thing for different countries? Well, our view is this. For this first season, the companies that came on the show have already raised around $200 million in financing since being on the show. $200 million. Our view is that if we do this show, wherever we do this show, in Brazil, with Brazilian companies, Brazilian deal makers, you'll see the same effect. We will have investors all over the world, potential partners all over the world, watch episodes of these shows, and this will help to drive local economic development by attracting capital to these regions. Very important. We have a real focus on ensuring that companies all over the world that are changing society for the better and are working on big, important problems, we want to shine a big spotlight on them and make sure that investors around the world know their names, know who they are, know what they're doing, and we want them to be successful. We want the countries to be successful. We want to drive their venture economy systems. Thank you for bearing with me. Now I'll introduce you to this amazing set of people. Actually, I'll let them introduce themselves. But Carl Sokol was an expert who came on the show. One of the themes, we have multiple themes of the show. We have artificial intelligence, climate, financial tech, healthcare. We decided that here we'd have the healthcare, a lot of the healthcare guys come out. So these two gentlemen are world-renowned healthcare experts that lent their expertise to the show. Sai, who's sitting over here, is a partner in a fund focused on business development. He'll talk a little bit about some of the investments that we've made. And Sandra is actually one of the producers. She's focused on healthcare as well. So maybe we take it from over here and have Carl, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
No, absolutely. Thanks so much, Steve. I really appreciate that. And thank you all for coming, joining, and hearing about this. It's probably a little bit different than I'd say, the last few panels, but hopefully it's going to be equally as fruitful. So I'm a general surgeon focusing in on robotic surgery. So that's my basic trade job. And to give just a little bit more, what Steve had said about the show, it's completely captivating. So we had met over a year ago, and I was explained this concept. And I thought I had known a fair amount about cutting-edge surgery. I do robotics. We pushed the envelope on that. And it opened my eyes to the sheer quantity of healthcare entities out there that we did not know much about. So, and one of my jobs is to screen that, not just go on television, but to screen those companies and analyze them. And I was blown away at the technology. And the piece I can't stop thinking about is did we get information overload? Are we not able to sift through as well as we could 20 years ago because there's too much? Now, you can use AI to generate your own company. There's millions and millions. So what do we know, or how do we know? Which are the ones that we need to focus on? Which are the ones that are going to make a true difference? And which are the ones should we invest in, not just financially, but ethically as well? So it's just been a tremendous honor to be with this crew. And with that being said, the other aspects I do in life, I help run a hospital. I'm one of the board of directors of a small rural hospital, which has actually developed tremendously over the past couple of years. And I'm also the trauma medical director there as well. But thank you all so much for having us today. And I'll pass it off to Mikhail.
So first of all, thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Steve. It's an honor to be here. Thank you, Dr. Richter, for having us. So my name is Mikhail Higgins, and I'm an interventional radiologist, which for many of you who don't know what that is, I provide minimally invasive, non-surgical solutions to common medical problems. I was in academic medicine in a city called Boston in the United States, and then I moved to the Bahamas to essentially translate what I thought were sort of advanced minimally invasive techniques into a region where I thought it was devoid of. So I became the first board-certified interventional radiologist in my country, and at the time I was one of 3 in the English-speaking Caribbean. And what I introduced in the Caribbean at the time was a non-surgical minimally invasive treatment for women with uterine fibroids. At a time when women were getting their uteruses removed in 20s, 30s, I provided a treatment where they got to keep their uteruses. Time when women would have surgeries 2-3 years at a time, I was able to introduce a technique that essentially provided a treatment where they didn't have to consider a repeat surgery. So I'm the president and founder of an organization called the Bahamas Fibroid Interventional Clinic, and now the founder of an organization called the Bahamas Interventional and Surgical Suites. And I'm also a member of an organization called GARM, which is the Global Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, which we'll talk about, which also promotes longevity-promoting therapies. And so, when I was invited to be here at Horasis, the first thing that really captivated me was the theme for this year's session, which is sort of harnessing the power of global cooperation. About, obviously, a year ago, we filmed this first season of Success Investing in Humanity's Future, and it's just serendipitous how resonant and symbiotic and synchronous the theme for the Horasis meeting is with, obviously, the show. And when I think about global cooperation, the first question that I sort of want to ask it's a question that we ask every day on the show. How are we investing in humanity's future? Okay? And, on the show, we're not just talking about markets. We're not just talking about infrastructure. But we are always talking about people. Always, right? We're talking about health of people. We're talking about people's creativity. We're talking about people's dignity and people's ability to thrive. And so what I'm most excited about, just being a part of this highly enterprising, impactful, and meaningful show, is the ability to take something that is so human and make it so universal, right? So excited to obviously discuss the show and obviously what it is that we'll hopefully be bringing to Brazil in years to come.
Thank you, Mikhail. And we enjoyed, these gentlemen were really fantastic on the show and shedding light on problems that millions of people are facing around the world. And there's light at the end of the tunnel for them, and there's economic development for the countries as well. This is Kumaran. Why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about some of CrossWork's successes?
Of course. Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Frank, for having us here at Horasis. It's really a pleasure to be here. We've been meeting some really good people over the last couple of days and looking forward to meeting more people later today and tomorrow as well from all around the world, so it's been really good. So again, thank you for having us, Frank. I'll shed some more light on CrossWork and kind of our group there. We do a lot of late-stage investing at CrossWork. Focuses for us tend to be AI, technology, and some healthcare as well. Just had a really good last couple of years. We're able to sort of invest at some really good discounts to the last institutional round, provide shareholders in the private markets with liquidity while still gaining access to some really good companies like Anthropic, Cerebras, DataStax. We've had a couple of exits recently. One of our companies, DataStax, they were acquired by IBM. Scale AI. They were, Meta invested about $14 billion in their company. It's one of Meta's largest investments, to date. So they invested $14 billion for roughly 49% of the company. Last year we invested in Audit Board, sort of one of the largest M&A transactions in the private markets of 2024. And we're continuing to see really good progress with a lot of our companies. We're investing in Cerebras. They've been growing exponentially. They have a really strong partnership with the Mayo Clinic, for example. We invested at right around a 50% discount to their $4.2 billion valuation. They just raised about $1.1 billion at an $8.1 billion valuation. So, we're really excited to see their growth. So continuing to invest in these companies while also getting involved with projects like the TV show that Steve, spoke about just now. And again, just investing in companies that are really, doing good for humanity and really, adding to economic development around the world. So thank you again for having us and looking forward to conversating more here.
Thank you, Sai. Yeah, and last but not certainly least, as Sandra, but why don't you introduce yourself?
Great. Thank you, Steve. Thank you all for being here. It's really, truly an honor of a lifetime for us, for me particularly. I'm just a small town girl from Wyoming. But no, really, my recent role is currently an executive director of the Converse County Hospital in Wyoming. This is a new role for me, but it is a foundation that I've been involved with before I was born. And what I mean by that is I come from a town where I am, there's a generational presence where we are. And I think that story will come into play as we answer some more questions in relation to why we're here discussing global impact and communities. I work side by side in a lot of different ways with Dr. Sokol. He's my husband. But we're business partners. And we were just looking for ways to contribute to society more than our line of work. And the show presented itself, and I knew we had to do it. There was just a reason that we needed to be involved in this. So, like I said, it's such a huge honor to be involved in this show because as a consumer, as a mom, you want to leave a legacy. You want to know that what you are doing, you're leaving a footprint for your family and hopefully for the world. And I think we're doing that. I think we're gonna help these companies. We're gonna help people solve these problems on a global scale and for us and our own communities. So thank you for having us.
Fantastic. Yeah. So there's something that I'm thinking about doing just in real time on the fly, like while we're here. So I think the original plan was to ask questions and have to these guys and have them talk about economic development in the show. But there are quite a few people here, and I wonder if there are people that have questions for us. Frank, is it okay if people ask questions? Sure. So are there any other questions that anyone has here that we can answer? You know, come over.
Here we are.
Thank you all so much for being here. And you have such an amazing perspective because I don't know if we've heard about healthcare yet. So only because I've made friends with a few people on the panel over the last couple days, like many of us have, I have maybe a little bit off the wall question. So for the couple that's on the stage, you talked significantly about the impact that you all have made in economic development in your region of the U.S. And so all of us, in rural America, we have very similarities to everyone that live in global rural communities. How have you made a direct impact on changing the face of healthcare and increasing access to people who may not have had access to healthcare before you went into that community?
I take first stab, Sandra? Yeah, okay. Amber, thank you so much. It's good to see you again as well. So this is a big topic, a very important topic, an incredibly important topic. What we're talking about is rural medicine, right? Are there any people in the audience that deal with medicine on a regular basis? Healthcare professionals? Perfect. Excellent. And with rural healthcare? No. It's it's become very niche. And the reason is it's separated itself a fair amount, at least in the United States, and I suspect in many other countries as well. So we speak about a lot of isms. We don't talk about ruralism and how healthcare has been affected specifically in rural areas, which actually makes up the majority populace in the country itself. Yes, we have a fair amount of infrastructure and a lot of talent that coalesces itself into the big cities. But what about rural? And I'll give a good example. So go to one of the most rural states in the United States, which is Wyoming. Population 560,000. There's 28 hospitals. Out of those 28 hospitals that we know of, 10 are in the green, right? These are almost all rural hospitals. They are a mix of profit, nonprofit, and obviously government-related memorial entities. But out of those 28 hospitals, 10 are self-sustaining. Means the other 18 are not. So they are running a deficit year by year. Somebody has to pick that up, and they, in terms of financial recuperation, in order for them to remain afloat. Now, every time we lose a rural hospital, we don't just lose access to health care. We lose a big piece of that community. If you move into the smaller communities, population 5,000, population 10,000, the hospital itself sometimes makes up 50% of the jobs, of the community impact. If the hospital folds, the community does terribly, unfortunately. So the big question is, we're behind 50% already. How do we turn this around? And it does, Amber, relate into how do we gain the access, but more importantly, how do we get sustainability to start with? Now, that's the difficult portion. And one of the answers, I think, comes in new technology. Now there's a million pieces that come into this, and I'll focus only on a couple because this is one heck of a long discussion and a great discussion, albeit. But in a hospital, the biggest income generator is surgery. We actually lose money when it comes to family medicine and OB practice, believe it or not. So you have to look at your surgical services. You have to feed the financial engine to keep it sustainable. So that's the first piece. But how do you do that, right? And there's a trend in rural hospitals. It's not uniform, but there is enough of it that you can extrapolate what's going on. And surgeries aren't being performed as much. whether that's related to medical litigation, whether it's related to my personal thought process on this, is that surgeons are becoming not less capable, but less willing to perform certain procedures in the hospital itself. So that leads to an exodus of the patients, an out referral to the larger hospitals surrounding. And you end up losing your patient base, which again, obviously disrupts the community and doesn't give tremendously good care. And to go back to Wyoming, if you send somebody to a different hospital, you're sending them 3 hours. 3 hours drive. Not like Sao Paulo, where 3 hours can be, it seems, around 20 kilometers, but perhaps even 90, 100, 150 miles to get the same care they could normally get. How we bridge this gap specifically with technology is utilizing robotics, introducing robotics. New concept? Not exactly. It's been around for a while. We just needed to remold it, reshape it, and see the vision that it could potentially provide. So robotics, and just to give a quick background for those not tremendously involved in the field, is robotics is truly a robotic platform that you operate on. So it has higher dexterity, it has haptic feedback, better visualization. You're able to do far more complex procedures with the robot than you are with really anything else. But robotics was developed by a DARPA fund by the US Army initially, but it was used for austere environments. The only problem is that we could not utilize it in combat surgery. It just wasn't feasible. So then it moved to the private market, and that's when it started developing. In its infancy, it was around in the early 2000s, but they were too cumbersome. We ended up the robotics companies ended up developing them so well that now they can be perfectly interchangeable in a small hospital. So you ask, how did robotics change it? How did robotics change the makeup of a hospital? Well, we instituted a robotics program 1 year ago in our small hospital. Population 6,000, I believe. Population 6,000 in a critical access hospital that was barely surviving. And what that did is that truly turned our tide. So not only were we able to perform the regular cases that were there, we were able to multiply the service lines and provide operations that they were doing at level 1 centers. And we could do it safely. Because what the robot did is it was able to perform higher complexity, higher diversity of cases, and you didn't need as many cases. You didn't need as many repetitions as you normally do to get a safe outcome. So that's some out-of-the-box thinking where we all thought the robot should probably be in a large academic institution, and then we could push it to its limits there, when truthfully, it was probably meant, or at least best suited, to be in a rural environment. Since we instituted that robotics program, it has went from 5 to 50% MGMA for us. We now bought a second hospital and are directly competing with level 1 centers. And we're small. We're small, not-for-profit group, and we keep pushing the envelope. And that really turned the tide. And one other piece to that is that after that occurred, it changed our culture, which is a big piece in medicine. Any doctors in here know this. Culture and dogma are difficult to shake when it comes to medicine. And thinking outside the box, identifying the technology, and seeing where does it fit, where can we use it best. That's what's going to change. So when we move into quality of care in a rural environment and access of care, it's going to be changing that culture and embracing the technologies, even though we don't think they're necessarily meant for that, right? And you just got to try it. So once we get that, then we save the community hospitals. We save them. We keep the communities themselves intact. We keep them flourishing. And the hospitals don't get bought up by a larger corporate model, which surprisingly a lot of patients aren't tremendously interested in. And that in itself is its own culture. So I hope that was satisfactory, Amber, for that. Any other thoughts on that?
And the rural communities also trickle into Caribbean. My family's from Caribbean. We've done work in USVI, and a lot of what we see in rural America is in the islands. Have you seen that when you, Dr. Higgins, went back, you said, to the Bahamas to do work there? How is the economic development based off of the work you were able to do specifically in healthcare?
Thank you. So this is going to be a very different response. So first and foremost, I think in my culture, there is this culture that we want to see sort of development in medicine, but it's not at the expense of money, right? And so let me sort of reframe that. So there are many doctors in the Bahamas and in other sort of kind of private jurisdictions across the Caribbean that have thrived in an environment where they're sort of in a blue ocean. They are operating and doing what they want to do because they're an N of one or an N of two. And so what ends up happening in many of those environments is people try to come back from the US, Australia, South Africa, and the UK, and they find it hard to adapt or even to be welcomed because it's not this sort of concept of let me sort of help introduce you to this environment and help you to sort of kind of introduce your practice because they see it as a threat to their pockets. And I found that when I came to the Bahamas. When I came back to the Bahamas, I was an interventional radiologist, and I remember a sports medicine doctor said, she said, you know, you don't really specialize in anything. You're not really in the brain, even though you do stroke care. You're not really in the heart, even though you could catheterize the coronary arteries. You're not really in the uterus as a GYN. You treat fibroids, and you're in the knee, geniculate artery embolization for knee osteoarthritis. She's like, you're really not going to make a lot of friends here. And I sort of paused and I thought about that and I said, wow, that's a very much a scarcity mindset. And so when I came to the Bahamas, one of the first things I wanted to do was to level the playing fields. And I remember when I was in academic medicine, I was a university professor for 5 years, and I remember one of my mentors, she said, you know, WIFT, what's in it for them? She said, always remember that. She said, when you go back to the Bahamas, always remember what's in it for them. So I thought about that. I said, well, how can I present myself as somebody who is going to not just help our patients, because I know my practice is obviously going to advance healthcare in a meaningful way. Obviously, interventional radiology, wherever you are in the world, is important, whether it be for supporting catastrophic care, emergencies, whether it be in transplant centers and helping to reduce and prevent complications, whether it be to provide non-surgical alternatives. So I knew sort of the benefit and the value proposition of my practice. And so I started basically moving and basically having one-on-one discussions with colleagues and trying to figure out how we could collaborate, how they can sort of find ways that I could support their practice. And then it got to a point where they saw, you know, actually, if you're a part of my practice, actually, we can have more people who usually would leave my office and I would never hear from because perhaps what I'm offering is something that seems a little threatening, a little daunting to them. But it seems like if I'm working with you, we can actually advance something that's a little bit more palatable to the patient. So here is we're finding synchronicities that actually are palatable to them. And then it got to a point where now I'm building a interventional and surgical center. And what a lot of my colleagues in the US and again in UK and Australia think is that it's an environment that's not hospitable to them. And so I said, you know what? That's the first thing that we'll address is you will come to an environment that is hospitable because I'm creating a center where you'll be able to provide sessional services, whether it be once a month, 3 times a month, 4 times a month, whatever it may be. That's one thing which is obviously speaks to the culture, right? So we are going to promote a culture that welcomes innovation wherever you are. If it benefits the Bahamian people and the Caribbean people, you should be here. That's number one. The second thing is I looked at it from a medical tourism perspective, right? So what I'm doing is I'm saying, you know, if we have 400,000 people in the Bahamas and 18,000 I'll look at something, for example, in terms of fibroid care, there's probably about 40 to 45 gynecologists in the Bahamas, okay? Now, they do very, very well because they operate on hysterectomies and myomectomies on the 80% of Bahamian women who have fibroids because of being of African descent, and they do very, very well, okay? So that's about 18,000 people a year that are essentially treated in our medical centers. And so I brought this concept, I said, well, if you look across the entire English-speaking Caribbean, why can't those patients come to the Bahamas to get care? right? Why can't they travel to the Bahamas? Because ultimately they're traveling somewhere to access interventional radiology services. I've met people throughout the Caribbean who've gone to DC, who've gone to the West Coast to access care in a foreign land. Why can't we increase the denominator of patients that are coming? And so what that does now is now the government's now invested because they say, well, okay, we don't have anything outside of our traditional tourism product of sun, sand, and sea where people come for a vacation, but if people can come to get care, if people can actually convalesce here, this is something that is a value proposition that everybody can get around. So now they can create incentives for people who are essentially wanting to come back home to create opportunities for them so that they can not only benefit, obviously, the Bahamian people, but people across the Caribbean that could also come to help develop a robust medical tourism product. So that has kind of been my focus in the Bahamas, and I've looked at fibroids as kind of being the first thing that I essentially want to focus on, and that I have been focusing on. The second thing has been regenerative medicine, and we've not sort of kind of touched on this, and I'm sure that we will. Yeah. Regenerative medicine. Yeah. And so in terms of the regenerative medicine pieces, you know, one of the things in being an environment that is more nimble is being able to create sort of legislation that allows us to invite global partnerships. And that's one of the things that we're advancing that's also helping with our medical tourism product.
Phenomenal. Thank you very much, Mikhail. So just one other, so non-healthcare questions. I know that, please.
Interested in economics and politics, took a class at PPE in Oxford, and I said, where's the most interesting place? And I went to Russia, and I wanted to help them, and I said, how do I help them? And I worked for the U.S. Defense Department, actually working on nuclear medicine. How do we use the oncology to find diseases? I decided it was too cold and corrupt. I went back to DC and started at DARPA, working on AI and the internet with Vint Cerf, and how do we have companies collaborate as well as doing drug discovery for SmithKline Beecham. I've got my MBA at Kellogg.com crash. I was in the venture and went to Harvard Kennedy School, studied international economics, national security policy, took a class on international economics and technology with my mentor Iqbal Qadir, who started Grameen Phone in Bangladesh, which was the first cell phone company in Bangladesh by selling to women and having one woman in a village call the other woman in a village and create a whole community out of that. I was interested in economics, but my PhD, but it was hard to get through to the men who largely ignored and dismissed most women, unfortunately. So I said, how do we solve this problem? And so he got me through the World Economic Forum. And I said, what are you doing about women? And they said, nothing, we have no resources. It's not a problem. I said, we're half of the world's population. So I wrote the first paper for WEF on why women matter. We're 60% of the educated labor force and 80% of purchasing decisions. That started the WEF gender program. I went into finance, Wall Street, London, worked at RenCap, Renaissance Capital, leading JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs to their first investments in Ghana, in Russia, and Ukraine. .com crash. Went to Rio Tinto as a macroeconomist, crashed again, and went into finance again. I was still the only woman out of 20 at the biggest bank in America. And I said, how do I get through to these men? And I said, TV and movies. And that's what, so now I produced with a friend who grew up with Bob Marley, a reggae song about humanity, running movies, and so, but how do I get it out there? I mean, my producer his name is Andy Kravitz, he's related to Lenny Kravitz, but on YouTube, all we can see is Kravitz, and so now that you've come to this conclusion too, I think that the way to get through to people is TV, movies. How do you get it out there?
I'm happy to do a quick answer, and I know that we're running really close on time. I think that you have there's a conference that's coming up next week. It's the biggest television market show in the world. It's called MIPCOM. Yeah, it's in Cannes. So all the buyers are there. I think we have a contingent of 1,500 people from from the United States that are out there. Many of whom are buyers. England sends over 1,000 people. I think Brazil sends a couple of hundred people. So the good product will often find kind of good sales channels, right? So I think and also I think it's similarly it's an entrepreneurial journey as well, of knocking on doors, until someone sort of opens and can see your vision, is aligned with your vision as well. Right? So now, Frank, I think we're over time, and you've been gracious here. Again, I really want to say thank you for putting on this amazing event. I mean, this is. I don't know how you do this because you have some of the most important people in the world here. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. It was a wonderful panel, and thanks so much, of course, to the panelists. So big applause to the panel.